Hello all, welcome to our channel. In this video, we will be discussing three key features in Terraform that can help us effectively manage our infrastructure code. And if you are new to the Terraform, don't worry, we have started this Terraform podcast. So in this podcast, you have a couple of videos where you can start, Terraform with the basics. Then we started the use cases, and now we started with the key features. So you can go back to the playlist, and I'll place playlist in the video description if you want to. Then let's get started. So what are the key features we are going to discuss about is the count, and it depends on, and the provisioner. So these three we effectively use in our work day-to-day basis based on which provider we have been deploying it. So let's see what is count. The count attribute actually helpful more when you want to provision same kind of resources or multiple. What does it mean is, let's say if you want to provision multiple EC2 instances or multiple S3 buckets or multiple ECS clusters, EKS clusters, depends upon the resource, what kind of you have been deploying. You can mention this count so that you can deploy those resources. But just you need to remember, you need to make sure the kind of resources and type of resource should be same so that you will not have any impact. That's the primary goal of count. Next is depends on. So this depends on also going to use so many times. So you might write the code, and you might have a dependency from one resource to other resources. Just like example, before provisioning the database, you want to provision EC2 instance, or before provisioning EC2 instance, if you want to provision database up and running. So you can have this mapping or dependency on, you can make it so that, it will establish the relationship between the resources. Then this in Terraform ensures that it creates configured resources in the correct order. That's the benefit of depends on. Next is provisioner. This provisioner is a kind of user data if you refer from the AWS side. What exactly it does is you can actually run this either a local executor or a remote executor after the provisioning of the resources. If you want to perform a specific job like installing and configuring, then you can use this. Usually nowadays we are using Ansible or Chef or Puppet. But if you don't have any other tools currently set up, then Terraform Provisioner will help you. But I personally recommend to set up the config management tool. But if you don't have, Provisioner will help you with that. Let's see examples for each one of it. If you look at a count, suppose if you want to, as I mentioned, if you want to launch multiple instances of an EC2, then we can use this count feature. Here is the normal code, how it looks like. Like when you're deploying these instance, you're going to have AMI and instance type, and here you can mention the count here too. What represents to is you want two instances to be deployed. So that's how you can use this count feature to deploy a number of instances as you need, a number of resources as you need from the same type. Next is depends on. This depends on, as I've been stated, like an example, for an EC2 instance to be deployed, you need to have a security group in place. Like this, you can validate and check before deploying your resources. You can make sure to say Terraform, okay, I want security to be available. That's how here, if you look at, while I'm creating an EC2 instance, here I'm creating a dependency relation for my security group. So this is an example. I'm going to show you all three are going to use in enterprise in real time. After this, there is a lab followed by this session. So stay tuned for it. Next, you have a provisioner. This is one of the important things. If you would like to use a small config during the deployment of provision itself, want to be pushed. Then in this example, if you look at, I want to deploy an EC2 instance. And here I want to have a provisioner remote X. What exactly it does is remote executable will run these commands specific order based on how you've been defined it. Like here, I want to get OS update. Then I want to install Nginx. when I want to start the Nginx service. So the order how you have been run, you can have this in place. So that's the benefit of provisioner. And you have local EX also, local executable also. Like, these specific commands will run in remote machine. But if you keep local executable, what happens is wherever you are running Terraform, in that instance, in that server, your script will run or commands will run. Specifically, like if you want to mention, in my example, I'm going to show you, like, I want to evaluate whether I'm able to, here I'm installing service, like, Nginx, but I will able to connect it, that I want to test it from outside of the machine, not from internally. That's where I'm going to use local exe. So I'm going to explain in the lab, which I'm forward by you have it. So there you will understand what I've been talking about in even deeper. So now let's start with this. Now we learned what is count, what is depends on, and what is provisioner. So we are going to use all three and see how we are going to cumulatively use these features and deploy the resources as we need. So let's jump into the lab. Let me explain the code repo for you, how the code repo looks like. So if this is the code repo, guys, I'm going to paste the Git repository in the video description. You can find the code which I've been explaining now. So this is the provider. In the basic and intro videos, I explained all of these resources. So I'm going to skip most of this, and I might be focused more on the features which I'm going to talk. Now, if let me quickly jump into that. See, here I mentioned that depends on. What does it mean is, like, here actually here I'm going to create a security group, but for me to create a security group, my dependency is VPC. So here I'm ensuring VPC is going to create before my security group starts. That's where depends on my AWS VPC, EC2 VPC. So here, if you look at my VPC, see, EC2 VPC. So this is what I kept this resource as my dependency for my security group. So that's the first dependency which I used over here. Next, want to have it, defined a dependency on my EC2. If you look at my EC2, I'm creating a dependency for my security group, because if I want to deploy an EC2 instance, I want my security to be created and available for to be consumed. So I'm saying depends on AWS security group, which I just creating above as a resource. Look at here. So this one I'm keeping as my dependency in my EC2 instance. So that's how the Terraform makes sure my security group is being created and available before it starts. My EC2 instance provisioning starts. So that's the other dependency which I made it. And the other one which I want to look at in the count. So here I want to have a number of instances, and can be 1 or 2 or 3, depends upon how many instances you want, but I made it variable over here. So if you go to variable, here I have a number of instances. The default is set to 1. Here, as you need, you can change this default value to a number however you want. So that's the count benefit. But I'm going to help you to understand how this count variable has to be really utilized in the script. Because if you're deploying one instance, you might not need this count. But if you're deploying more than one, then count variable will be very helpful. At the same time, you need to remember when you're deploying multiple instances, that means for each instance you have an index of values. So when you deploy two instances, like say example, then you want to run remote executable, then this guy should know how this remote executable need to run on which instance when you deploy multiple. So that's where the string will be helpful. Index, if you look at here, AWS instance, for instance, here the index I gave 0, because right now I'm deploying only one instance. If you deploy 2, then second instance value will be 1. And if you deploy 3 instances, then third instance will be a 2. So it's n-1 kind of index. So then this guy will know for which instance to correct. So if you look at, I provided additional connection details here because here I'm using a provisioner. So provisioner means you want to run a specific set of commands remotely. So remotely means definitely Terraform has to connect to server. So you need to say to Terraform, I want to connect to so XN server with this username with this key. So that's where connection details I provided here. If you look at here, the connection type SSH, user Ubuntu, private key which I used for key generation, like key which I created. If you look at here, my keys will be there. See AWS key pair. For the key pair here, I'm allocating over here. And host, for which host I want to connect. I want to connect to AWS instance, EC2 instance with index 0 for the public IP, because so far I haven't created the instance. So I need to provide from the passing variable from above resources. Then I'm going to run a remote executable. Here it's called a provisioner. As I mentioned so far, you looked at how I used count, how I used depends on. Now I'm starting with a provisioner. So provisioner, I want to install, update, Nginx. So first I want to update the system. That's why apt-get, since it is an Ubuntu based machine instance which I'm deploying, I used apt-get update. Then I want to install Nginx. Then I want to start Nginx service. And after this is for remote executable, which I've been mentioned. Now I have a provisioner local execute. This I use to make sure my web server is reachable. That's why what I'm doing is, so I'm doing a network connectivity test from my local. That means this will validate from my local machine where I'm running this Terraform. So nc-zv here, the public IP, which I want to connect to instance, then port 80. And until I'm doing like for 10 seconds, wait until it's been successful to connect. So this is a local execute. I want to make sure my web server is up and running. That's why I've been mentioning over it. And after this, I'm creating a resource. So here, apart from EC2, I want to create an S3 bucket also to make sure, you have it depends on to understand better. So if you look at here, I'm creating an S3 bucket over here. And I want to create ownership controls because it's a bucket owner preferred who have been creating it. And next, I want to create an ACL, which should be a private bucket. I don't want to expose to outside one. But here, to resource AWS S3 bucket ACL to work, I am saying depends on to the ownership control. So that means what it exactly does is, before it run this, it will make sure the ownership has been set over here on these resources. That's the depend on. So this is the three important key features or arguments. You can use it while deploying an EC2 instance, and not only EC2, for any resources in that matter which are supported by Terraform, obviously with the corresponding cloud providers. So hope you understand. Now let's run this basics like Terraform init installation. If you remember, I explained in other video. I'm going to post that video in this podcast series. Already been uploaded in YouTube channel. You can go to. My Terraform init has been working as expected. Now I want to do is Terraform plan. I want to evaluate my Terraform evaluation in terms of how it's supposed to work. So I'm going to create this Terraform plan. See, it is going to have 11 to add, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. So it is going to add 11 resources based on our provider. Now, if you look at here, just in Visual Studio, if you want to mention, see, here I provided a provider. These are all resources which I'm creating. VPC, Internet Gateway, routing table, subnet, route table association, security group, key pair, instant S3 bucket and S3 bucket ownership and S3 bucket ACL. So these are all the resources. In Visual Studio, if you've been observed, when you install this Terraform plugin, right from here, it can show what all providers, what all resources been associated with current stack. It will show it here for us easy and to maintain. Now I want to run Terraform apply. Let's see. So as soon as run, it's evaluated and it's going to show my plan 11 to add, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. So I'm good with it. So I'm performing yes. Now it started creating. If you look at my key pair is been created, and my bucket has been created, and VPC has been created, and in all the resources which have been mentioned over here in the resources, if you look at here, all these resources which is been creating by Terraform now. So it came to EC2 instance 0, which is first instance as part of my creation. So it is creating now. And if you look at EC2 instance is still creating, it's okay for me. It might take less than a minute for me to instance to be up and available. So let me show you my AWS console for your better visibility. Here, if it is, let me share. If you look at here, my EC2 instances, my EC2 instance has been running, and it is going to show me. See, it loaded instances for me. Now, this is the public IP 54.87.250.122 for now. Now, if I might go back to my Visual Studio, see here, it's created my resources, apply complete, 11 resources added, 0 change, 0 destroyed. And one thing I would like you to observe is the remote execution has been run over here. Now let me scroll up to make you understand. See, because it got packages to download, that's why it's a, 3 commands which I passed over here for my provisions to run, update and install and start the service. So here it is update. And if I go back below download, it's installing Nginx. Nginx, then it's going to start my service. Now, if you look at here, at last, the provision local repository ran it like NC using the connectivity to port 80. The connection to my server, you just showed your 5487 to 5142 port, connection to is successful. That means I'm able to connect to my port 80. Now let's copy this IP address, and now let's go to the browser and see how it's been working for us. Now, if you look at over here and my browser here and I press here. See, welcome to Nginx. So Nginx has been installed and it is up and running. So this is the public IP which we have been copying over here. So this is how actually your code will work when you want to be, whatever complexity you have, it's going to reduce your complexity. But while doing it, it might have multiple components. But once you have been stacked together, it's worked tremendously because it is repeatable code a number of times used because it's variable declaration, dynamic variables are there. So it's going to help you a lot. That's it for this video, guys. We have talked about depends on provisioner and count. These are very useful features in Terraform that can help you to manage your infrastructure more effectively. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video helpful. I'll see you in next session. Have a great day, guys.